We're joined today by two leaders who have helped build the Coastal Journalism Hub from the ground up. Suzanne Wertman is project manager of the Coastal Journalism Hub with a background in nursing, midwifery, public health, and community collaboration. She has now led the work of bringing journalists, community organizations, and residents together around shared learning and local storytelling. Joining her is J'vaneté Skiba, Executive Director of the new Hanover County Resilience Task Force. She leads a coalition of organizations working to strengthen community resilience and has been a key hub partner from its earliest days. Suzanne and J'vaneté, thank you both for being here. I'm going to turn it over to you all and go off screen till the end of our time together.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks,
Good
Jack.
afternoon, everyone. I'm Suzanne Wertman, and I'm really glad you're here. People hear about what we're doing and then often ask, how do you actually build a journalism hub? Not the idea of one, but the real thing. So, how do you bring journalists, community members, public health and nonprofit leaders, and community organizations into the same room? How do you build enough trust to keep people coming back? And what actually happens once they're there? That's what we're going to explore today. For most of my career, I've worked to solve complex problems by bringing people from different systems together. When we began building the Coastal Journalism Hub, I realized those same skills were just as important to journalism as they had been to healthcare. The hub began with conversations. As we met with people across New Hanover County, one conversation led to another. People introduced us to colleagues, neighbors, and community leaders they trusted. And looking back, I realized the hub wasn't built because we had a perfect model, for sure, but it grew because people were curious and willing to connect with one another. Over time, those relationships became the foundation of the hub. And today, we'd like to show you what that looks like in practice and what we've learned from building it.
Hi, everyone. I'm J'vaneté Skiba, as Jack mentioned, and I have the privilege of leading a resilience collaborative that brings all kinds of people to the table, from large systems to single staff nonprofits. Our goal is to help our community heal from adverse experiences, toxic stress, and trauma. And trauma in our community, historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, is there just like any other community. And we want to work together as opposed to in silos, which happens far too often. We are working together to help providers in our community put out the fires without getting burnt out. We hear a lot about compassion fatigue and burnout from folks that we work alongside. But we're ultimately trying to change whole systems by putting community resilience at the heart of everything we do. In my work, I try to look at the big picture, the why behind our community's challenges. And when Suzanne invited me to join the hub, I was definitely interested. But what really engaged me was the trust that we'd already built together over the years in doing community work. Suzanne is a member of our task force, and I already had an established connection with her. And that connection was really what made the difference in me and my organization wanting to participate. I also realized that if we wanted to build a more resilient community, we needed more than programs and services. This is something that we've been saying for years. But we also needed stronger ways for our community knowledge to become public knowledge. So, really taking those experiences of the providers that I know and have worked with over time and leveraging them for really educating the community. And that's what I saw the hub making possible. Today, I want to share why this hub felt like an appropriate and beneficial fit for our mission. And I'll share why we decided to participate and show how real relationships are the best tool we have for making change. I deeply believe in connection, and especially when we elevate human stories to help people understand the hard data behind our community's biggest hurdles and our biggest strengths. We also want this to be an interactive session, so please use the Q&A throughout. We'll pause several times to hear from you because we believe the best learning happens through shared experiences. So we hope that you really do utilize that Q&A feature and share your thoughts throughout. And we'll do our best to keep up as you ask questions and share your insights.
Thanks, J'vaneté. Okay, so what is the Coastal Journalism Hub? At its simplest, it's a place where people who don't usually work together come together regularly to make better sense of what's happening in our community. The Hub isn't just another committee or coalition, though. It's a shared learning space. It's where journalists and public health and nonprofit leaders, data scientists, artists, and civic organizations, all of us here who are community members, learning from one another before stories are reported. And while we're all trying to make sense of important public issues, our purpose is simple: to help our community better understand themselves, so journalism, civic organizations, and public institutions can respond with a fuller picture of what's happening. And as you can see here from this, this beautiful web, we have people as varied as radio station, TV, print news, public health, nonprofits, data scientists, photographers, artists, and the United Way. We really have a real nice cross section of folks that are members of our hub.
And as you can see, as Susan so beautifully painted the picture, there are diverse partners at the table, which really meant a lot for me and the work that I do. But we had opportunity to have our editorial team meet weekly based on the partners that you saw on the last slide. And our nonprofit and community partners join twice a month. Around the table, you'll find all of those different partners that Suzanne mentioned. It's really a diverse group of folks from the community, organizations, and leaders throughout our community. We begin by checking in every day or every meeting and sharing what we're seeing in our corner of the community. So journalists talk about reporting they're working on. Community organizations share what they're learning from the people that they serve. That's some of what I contribute to our hub. And public health partners are bringing data and emerging trends. Community members add the history, relationships, and lived experience that help explain what those numbers actually mean.
So my job is to facilitate that conversation. No one organization owns it, right? My role is to connect ideas, ask good questions, notice patterns, try to keep us on track a bit, and make sure every perspective is heard. Together, the group identifies patterns. We've uncovered some really amazing ones, gaps in what we know, where we need to look for more answers, and we decide which questions deserve more attention. And before we leave, we agree on next steps, and it could be, whether or not we're pursuing a reporting project, if we're convening community conversation, gathering additional information, or bringing what we've learned back to the community. We don't make decisions for the community, though. We create a trusted space where different kinds of knowledge can come together so we can better understand ourselves, and the community that we're serving can better understand what's going on. That understanding, we believe, leads to stronger journalism, stronger relationships, and better informed public decisions. So how did we get started? Basically, we started with a question. We didn't really have a strategic plan. We started with conversations. When we first started exploring this idea of a collaborative, we weren't trying to recruit organizations necessarily, but we were trying to better understand the community. So we sat down with people for coffee or met them in their office and asked a simple question. who else should we be talking with? And every conversation ended the same way. People were enthusiastic about what we were doing and asking things like, who else brings a perspective that we're missing? They were answering, who else is trusted in the community? They were giving us referrals to talk with someone who understood something we don't yet understand. And one of the most important questions, I think, is asking who isn't invited into conversations like this, and those are the folks we really need to bring into the conversation. Every time we finished a meeting, the person that we were meeting with would say, "You really need to talk to so and so. I work with them on X, Y, and Z, and they would be perfect for this project." So the relationships didn't just support the hub, they became the hub.
And here's an opportunity for you to share a little bit with us right now. We'd love to hear from you in the Q&A. So again, please use that feature that you'll be able to find in your toolbar at the bottom of your page. But we'd like you to think about your community and the work you're doing in your community. Consider who is one person or organization that should be in the room, but usually isn't. And this can really be anyone. It can be a librarian, a neighborhood leader that you know of that gets a lot done simply because of the relationships that they have and the respect that they have in the community. Maybe it's a journalist or a public health professional. Maybe it's a youth organization or a faith leader or someone else entirely. Please feel free to go on and share those in the chat. Just type one person or organization, in the Q&A.
As we give folks a minute to drop into that new question, I'm just going to look at a couple of the responses that we've gotten and questions throughout as we've been going. Just going to name another person calling in from Greenville, uses CNN for their news. Someone in San Francisco uses Mission Local. Another person in Wilmington, local media outlet apps and mouth. Someone from Columbus, Ohio, popular news sources and smaller nonprofit mission-driven newsrooms. And now getting some responses to the question. I'll also give a shout out to that someone asked if we've done work around documentary film as a form of community resilience. They mentioned a specific film. Just the answer to that is yes, we have. We're definitely in my work. It is typical that the community member layperson is not in the beginning conversations that need to be. So it's typical in some spaces where community members just aren't in on the ground level. There's someone naming local neighborhood leaders is who they would like to have be in the room or who's missing. And then community colleges is another one. And then last one I see is, we got some more. We got another one. Well, so I'll say youth was mentioned. Community organizers that have been in the field for decades are often not in the room. Such large amounts of knowledge and insights that they hold are not included then. And then another one is civil servants are often missing from the public conversation, despite being a vital part of meeting community needs. So thank you all so much for those shares. And if any roll in after we continue, I'll just catch those. Oh, there's another one. I'll read that. So corner store business owners. Oh, that's a great one. Who see a lot of what happens on the ground day to day. I was watching television last night and somebody was like, we should go ask the mechanic what happened here yesterday. Because it's like the neighborhood store, like in real life, people know what happened in that spot, right, the day before. So, yeah, great. And I'll catch up on the Q&A next time we come around. But I'll hand it back over to y'all.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Yes, those are all wonderful, and I love that mechanic story, Jack. Yes, from youth to the business owner, being able to recognize that we don't always start there is important. And I'm reminded that every community already has the beginnings of a hub. With everyone that you all named in the Q&A, these people are already around. They're either already doing the work or they already have a good idea of what the strengths and the weaknesses or the needs of our communities are. So the opportunity isn't to create something entirely new, right? We are really bringing in that opportunity for people who are already knowledgeable to be more connected.
Thanks, J'vaneté. And thanks for everyone. You're giving me more ideas about who we should be asking to the table. So, what happens when communities learn together? These are the stories. These are our stories that grew out of conversations in the hub over the past year. When we started, we were definitely not trying to create more meetings. We were trying to create better journalism and stronger community understanding. J'vaneté, when you look at these headlines, what stands out to you?
Oh, wow. Honestly, what strikes me is how the range of issues are actually part of the bigger picture of community adversity. And, that's the lens that I see everything through. Things like
Mhm.
transportation, housing, and mental health, food access, those do not exist in these separate vacuums. And none of these stories started with a press release, right? They started because people in the hub were noticing these things and sharing what they were hearing and helping the journalists see the bigger picture. And again, that is something that I try to go back to all the time. What's upstream of these single issues? And these stories kind of hit on a lot of what we discussed and brought to light with the journalists in our hub.
Yes, that's exactly right. I really am amazed at how generous people have been in sharing their lived experience. Community organizations have shared so generously and really pointed us in the right direction. Um, Public health partners are, the folks from Cape Fear Collective have been just amazing in adding data and really helping us to bring more power to the stories. And the journalists are beautifully connecting the pieces of the puzzle, the lived experience and the data and context into their reporting.
And that's what makes these stories different. And I think it encourages us to continue to participate and show up because these stories reflect what the community is already talking about, not just what institutions are announcing. And it's also giving us opportunities to bring more context to the conversation for different parts of our community too, which I think is important to note.
Yeah, absolutely. It's this slide is proof that the conversations that are had in the community can become journalism, and that's what our hub is designed to do.
Mhm, mhm.
J'vaneté, I want to ask you a question. You've spent years building relationships across New Hanover County through your work with the Resiliency Task Force. What made you decide that the hub was worth investing your time and your organization's time?
I really think it comes back to that community perspective, engaging lived experience, whether it's from the provider or from community members who are experiencing any number of those adversities that we mentioned before. Um, what I hoped engaging the task force in the hub's work was really to offer that lens of community adversity. um, I know with our first story, the 17-year age gap, what really resonated for me and the work that we do around adverse childhood experiences, adverse community environments, atrocious cultural experiences. Is 17-year age gap is what the data show for childhood adversity and how that impacts the lifespan and later health outcomes. And it's about that 17 years, about 20 years when folks who have so much adversity or so many adverse childhood experiences, it can shorten their lifespan by up to 20 years if they have six. And so seeing that and seeing the stories of the people in different parts of our community who have that lived experience of this disparate outcome, it really pinged for me in how we can bring that to bear in the work that we're doing as a hub. So combining all of that, the journalism, the public health, community experience, this is what I'm talking about with that upstream lens. And it mattered so much from the beginning for us to be able to contribute that because it's the work that we've been doing. It's the reason we've been building relationships and trying to build a common language around resilience. So it did seem across me representing our 55 diverse organizations from, like I mentioned, the large health systems or large systems in our community to smaller nonprofits. All of those folks are doing the programming, and we are trying to break down the silos between that programming. And breaking down silos requires us to examine these stories together and make those connections. And this type of journalism, the stories that are created or written within this hub, leverage that community knowledge. So it's easier to bring those conversations to bear on our daily lives. And again, what we want to be able to do as a task force is help people shift away from thinking about these things as individual issues and start working together to address them as real systemic issues or systemic barriers that are keeping people from potentially living as healthily as they can, or keeping them from engaging in community the way that they really might want to.
Yeah. Yeah. None of us could have seen this whole picture on our own. And I think, bringing the community resiliency model to the hub has helped everyone to look at things with a different lens. And, when we bring all of our different perspectives together, we're definitely asking questions more intentionally. And I think we are able to, with the trust that we've built, tell better stories. So, 4 ideas that have guided the hub. We've spent the first part of today's webinar showing you what the hub looks like in practice, how it began, and what happens in the meetings and how the conversations lead to journalism. But when we've stepped back now and looking at the hub after our first year, we're asking, what actually makes this work? And we've realized it comes down to 4 practices that we return to again and again. And we started with relationships. That is the core of this work. Before we organized anything, we invested time and met with trusted partners, and leverage that trust to bring more people in. We also understand that people's lived experience is expertise. So community knowledge is the source. Our neighbors, the journalists, public health professionals, and the community organizations all see different parts of the picture. And the hub works because we can bring those perspectives together. And then we listen before deciding what matters. We ask questions and have curiosity instead of coming in with an agenda. And the listening informed how we told the stories and how we've been telling the stories. And most importantly, I think, is that we have shared ownership. the hub doesn't belong to any one person or any one organization. Everyone helps shape the conversations, and figure out what's happening, what questions to ask, and what comes next. And this is all really pretty simple, but together it really changed the way we all work. And it's strengthened the relationships we've built. We've had new partnerships, and it's ultimately leading to stronger journalism. So we want to talk a little bit more about each of these practices in depth. And we'll talk about the relationships part first. Again, as I said in the beginning, we didn't build this by recruiting organizations. We thought about, like, who do we know, and who could help us to answer some of these questions that we had, and were we asking even the right questions? So, as J'vaneté mentioned before, we've worked together for years at the Resiliency Task Force. Some of the other members of the hub, you know, one of our advisors now, who's at the university, was also somebody that works with us on the Resiliency Task Force, and she was able to help us bring in other people. When we talked with journalists, it was amazing to me that they said, "Oh yeah, well, we meet regularly with the folks at insert other media organization here." So they had already been working together on some level, but not at this level. But there was some trust there, and we had neighbors. I've got a neighbor who's a NPR reporter, and we met and talked about this, and it just built from us being already embedded in the community, and then inviting more of our colleagues and neighbors and friends into the process. I think I would be remiss if I didn't say, some of the skills that I've learned through the community resilience model have helped us to build the trust in the group to work together, and also help to frame how we practice. We've said from the start of this, we've all agreed as a group that we would not be extractive, that we wouldn't be just reporting on horrible things or reporting on great things, from behind a wall, that we would be doing this on purpose with the community. So, we've done some community listening sessions, and I'm going to talk about that when we talk about the listening first. But I do want to say that the community knowledge as expertise was something that was so vivid to me when we did. We had our data partner, our data journalist, do a language analysis of the notes that we took in our first listening session. And this really clarified for us. We just had a very simple word cloud that helped us to understand that what we were thinking, we were on the exact right track. And it actually helped us to refine what we were doing. J'vaneté, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because you helped us to facilitate that first that listening session, which was a learning session.
Sure. And, you bring up that point of a learning session. We wanted to make sure that we were kind of harnessing that lived experience, not to, as Suzanne mentioned before, be extractive, but to really make sure we were had a good understanding from the beginning of what those issues were. And during our listening sessions, I found it to be so important in those moments because I not only was able to hear the stories of folks working in the community, but I was also able to see how it impacted them. And that to me was evidence, I guess you can say, that we were on the right track.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
it
agreed.
really, yeah. And the stories that they shared or the data, because so often we can get lost in that hard data, but that qualitative data of the lived experience shared in that space. And we intentionally, in that first session, made sure that we developed as safe a container as we could because we wanted to build trust. We wanted those community members to understand that what they shared was going to be shared back with them. And I think because of, again, relationship and how people knew um, me in the community through the task force and Suzanne in the community through her work, they were able to share in a way that might not have come up if we were just creating a an article, just
Right,
reporting on,
right.
right? If we were just trying
Yeah,
to break a news story, um, it was really about mining our community strengths so that we can meet our community needs. So the
yeah,
relationship again is central to getting that community knowledge and expertise
yeah,
shared freely. Yes.
yeah. And asking people, in that first session, we didn't have anyone recording or taking photographs. But we did ask, what do you want people to know about what you
Mhm.
do? So we met with community health workers, and it's funny. I remember before the second session was scheduled, I saw one of the perinatal community health workers in the community, and she was like, "Why haven't you met with us again? We're anxious to meet. We want to keep talking." And that to me shows that those the power of saying, here I have this voice, and let me help you to find yours and to bring and to amplify the experiences that you're having. And I think that collaborative um, basis is the root of what everything that we do. And the thing about finally shared ownership is you know as our colleague and hub partner from Shoresides, Ren Smith, says, the best way to protect something is to make sure everyone owns it. And so, it's important. Like, we had that one listing session, and there were some people at the beginning who were like, "What are you going to do with this information? Are you really going to do anything? Like, nothing ever changes here. So why should we trust you?" But they showed up, and so what are we doing to help share that the stories and podcasts back with the community? We work hard to make sure that we've got a good communication pathway open through social media, through newsletters, through emails and meetings in person, and with the curiosity always, right? So we're always looking for the expertise in the community.
And I think too, Suzanne, with that, the way that shared ownership plays out across the partner organizations and the journalists is kind of it's a loop, right? It's a
Yeah,
reciprocating loop because it shows up in the storytelling. It can be regarded across the community as something that's not just a product, but actually bringing us all together and spurring conversation and shared knowledge. And that increases that sense of shared ownership because it doesn't feel like it's just some product that someone's trying to extract.
yeah, yeah. One of the best things I think that happened to me was hearing a community member, or actually reading a community member seeing it on social media, seeing a community member post a video, and he's like, yeah, there's a 17-year gap in the life expectancy, and we've got to have better um, food access. And it was so great to, like, I think too, I've heard it at the Resiliency Task Force, people who are in the work are feeling heard, and that's empowering them to keep doing the work. And it's like ripples out, or like echoes that, they may not know exactly where they read it or saw it, but they know about this story that we've been talking about since January. And that helps to fuel us to keep going too, because we can see it making a difference. So we're going to ask you now to take a minute to think about your own community. So remember, at the top of the hour, Jack asked you to grab that piece of paper. You can pull it out or open up your notes app. Or if you're just a thinker, think. But I really would encourage you, knowing the neurobiology, to get your hands moving and write some of these things down, or type some of these things. And I want you to think about a challenge that your community is facing. I don't think we have any lack of challenge right now. Pick something that maybe no one organization can solve by themselves. And it could be housing, it could be transportation, youth mental health, food access, disaster recovery, substance use, or something completely different. So think about that. And then ask yourself 3 questions. Who's already working on this issue that you know of? And think broadly. Think about schools, libraries, faith communities, journalists, public health folks, nonprofits, neighborhood organizations, individuals, community organizers. Just make a list. And then second, who connects these groups together? We all have those bridge makers, those networkers. I'm one of those folks. And again, like J'vaneté said earlier, it might be that person in your neighborhood who just happens to organize neighbors for a block party. They don't really maybe necessarily have a title, but everybody seems to know them, and they're trusted by different people in the community, and they are, willing to introduce people to one another. So think about those folks. Write down 1 or 2 of those connector people, and then think about who's missing. So we all know that there are lots of people who have no voice, or who are excluded from conversations, either on purpose or by accident, or oversight, especially those who are deeply affected by the issue, and who may have knowledge that's not being recognized, and what perspective would make the collaboration stronger if they were in the room. There was that you could figure out a way to bring them into the room. So take another couple of moments and add those names. Give me just a few more seconds here. Now, as you look at what you've written, notice something about it. You didn't create anything new. You may have uncovered something that already exists. And a lot of these relationships are already there in your community. The organizations are there, the expertise is there. And what often doesn't exist is what we found here. There wasn't a place where people could regularly learn from one another, build trust, and begin working together. And that's what we've been trying to build with the Coastal Journalism Hub. There's, like I said before about the journalists, they were already collaborating. We didn't create those collaborations from scratch. J'vaneté and I were already working together with other folks in the hub, but we weren't working on this problem. We weren't working in this manner. We weren't doing these intentional things together and creating a space where collaboration could happen. So what would it take to connect these people? That's the final question. Think about that question, mull it over, and yeah, let us know in the Q&A if you have any insights. J'vaneté, over to you.
Sure. Please, as Suzanne said, just go on and add those in the Q&A if you care to. But what she just walked through is exactly how many strong collaborations begin. You start by understanding who's already doing the work, who are the connectors, and whose voice is missing. But bringing people into the same room is part of the process. The real question continues, and is how do you know whether that collaboration is becoming stronger over time? In our work with the Resiliency Task Force, we found a few questions that help us reflect on that. And it's really, and as the leader of the task force, these are some questions that I might ask myself. Are we meeting a true need in the community? Are we building on community strengths? Are we creating a shared language? Are we creating conditions where people feel respected, supported, and able to participate? Are relationships becoming stronger over time? And I think these all really do bring us back to connection and how we are designing the spaces, the opportunities, the lens, a way of seeing things through relationship as opposed to just getting something done or having this product, but really seeing why we do, how we do, and what we do with that lens of relationship.
And we've shared, what works for us, but every community is different. And we'd love to hear from you now. Are there any questions that you have about building a hub in your own community? Jack is going to check the Q&A for us and see what we've got going on.
We had a question come up while y'all were speaking earlier about someone wanted to know more about how you use the word cloud exercise. I believe this was during the listening session section.
Sure. Okay, so it actually wasn't an exercise, but we do have a data scientist who we work with. And we had 6 or 7 different questions that we'd asked the community health workers. We each took notes and we put those notes into a document that she then analyzed using data analysis program of language, and came up with a lot of amazing insights by just looking at our notes. Does not sound, like it's not going to, it wouldn't pass muster in terms of a science experiment, but it was really helpful for us, for those of us who were there, and then those of us who were not there, to better inform kind of the things that we were already thinking about, and actually gave us some newer insights. Like, for example, transportation was the #1 challenge. And what was not surprising was community was the #1 strength. J'vaneté, do you have any other
Yes.
insights to add to that?
Absolutely. And this isn't specific to something we've done in the hub, but something that I've done in my work too, is a word cloud is a really great way to take some of those, the themes within your qualitative data, and create a visualization that can speak to people. So whether you're using a program that's pulling things out of the data that you've collected in interviews or information sessions or listening sessions, You might also want to include platforms that can create word clouds by direct input from participants. So things like, and not to endorse any one platform, but just to give you an example, Mentimeter has a word cloud option or feature that I've used personally that I think is really helpful. And I know that there are other platforms that you can use, and that can be beneficial too because you can capture it directly from participants. So there's another way that you can include that as an exercise for participation from the folks that you're working with to understand their experiences.
I hope that answered that question. What else have you got, Jack?
Uh, Someone's wondering, what is the hardest part of running the hub?
Oh, okay. How vulnerable should I be right now? I think for me, it requires a lot of organization, and also a willingness to. I mean, my motto is always progress, not perfection. I think I've every week when we meet, I kind of take a deep breath and hit start on the Zoom. And I'm not sure where we're going, and it feels a little bit tightrope walking, because I take that trust thing really seriously. And Yeah, I think it's just jumping in and getting it started and doing it, even if you're afraid.
Mhm. We have another one asking, how does the hub define and then measure success?
Is that from our impact data person? That question. So I think, and then if you really ask me what's really hard about the hub is measurement. So we do have some tools that we're using that we've developed with the folks who you'll hear from on the next webinar. That's a good segue. The folks at Montclair State University who've helped us with the technical side of building a journalism collaborative. There are lots of different ways to measure impact. We're using lots of different tools on social media to check views, Substack to check how many times people read an article or react to it. Our media partners can tell us how many people have read something online, or how many times they've listened to a podcast. So that's the hard, like the numbers. And then I think that people keep showing up to our community events. That helps. And I think the other impact is, I was sharing this with J'vaneté when we were getting ready for this webinar, just sitting around the room or being on Zoom with folks, and they come in and they're talking, or when we're leaving, they're talking about, okay, well, I'm going to email you later. Or, oh yeah, we need to work on that project together. The connections that have come out of this are really part of the impact as well.
Hmm. And then I'll just ask you one last question, which is, how are you envisioning the hub's future and what are your hopes?
Mm. J'vaneté, what do you think?
I guess my hope as a community partner in this is for all of our shared missions um, to continue to be reflected in the stories. I think the work that we all want to accomplish, we see within the hub as being a community effort. That's why another reason I think we continue to show up for each other and for this specifically. So my hope is for that to get richer and deeper, and for us to continue to bring these stories to the living rooms and coffee meetups and playground conversations and water cooler conversations all around our community, because people are paying attention and feeling more connected with the stories that we're sharing around the hard data. And they're not just news stories. They are really the interconnected stories of our community. And that's my hope, is that people continue to return to them and we continue to have space to share and to build
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. And I hope we have more engagement. You know, already I've heard from people saying, wow, that was a really good story that I read and I wasn't expecting it. Or I really, you know, they're doing work with you guys. I'll have to give them another listen. And again, I think the community response of being empowered when their story is being shared and when people are talking about their own lived experience on you know, community wide, I think that that creates the environment for real change. And you know, that's why I started my career in healthcare, is to make things better for people. And I think through this collaboration, we're doing that. And it on that note, I would like to end where we began. We started with conversations. The conversations led to more conversations, building relationships, making new relationships. And we kept asking that one simple question: who else should be in the room? And that's the question that changed everything. That's how I got invited in. That's how J'vaneté got invited in. And we grew not because we had all the answers, but because we were curious and wanting to hear from other people in our community with new perspectives. We wanted to make sure that we've got trust built and that we're creating an environment where we can learn together. So as you leave today, I'd like to invite you to ask that same question in your own community. Who else should be in the room? Everybody already has people with knowledge, experience, and relationships worth bringing together. And you don't need to recreate our hub, but you do need to build one in your community that reflects your community, the whole thing. And that's how stronger journalism begins and how communities can build greater shared understanding.
And as we leave today, I'd invite you to ask yourself one question: how will I strengthen relationships in my community? And relationships are the work. So often we want to zip right past that. They take so much of us, but it is so important because they are built at the speed of trust. And that takes time and continued investment. And so, just to strengthen one relationship, invite one new member or one new person into the conversation, convene one gathering, even if it's just over coffee. You don't need a large budget, you don't need to form a formal coalition. You simply need to begin connecting people who should already know each other and be in connection with one another. And every community already has trusted leaders, local knowledge, and people working to make things better. And the opportunity is to connect those strengths so communities can learn together, solve problems together, and respond together. So I hope this feeds you all and gives you some ideas of how you can build relationships and support a hub. And we hope today's conversation inspires you to begin that work in your own communities now. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm sure Suzanne thanks you too.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And Jack?
Thank you both so much, J'vaneté and Suzanne. Really appreciate your time and energy. And to everyone, we're really glad that you joined us for some time this afternoon. Please be looking for an email from us that will include a link to this video. And we'd also love to see you next week for our next webinar, which is on turning community stories into civic infrastructure. That's with Amy Maestas and Delaney Butler from the Collaborative Journalism Resource Hub. Thanks again, and hope you enjoy your day.